Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us on a Saturday morning for Bird Bar Place's Let's Talk About Money panel discussion. My name is Tafari Maynard. I'll be moderating for us this morning. So before we start, I've got a couple notes. We're going to be recording this Zoom event today so we can share it on our website and our personal finance resources website. And then another reminder is that to be eligible for the $50 gift card that you get for attending today's panel, you must be a Bird Bar Place client. You've got to stay for the full event and then complete a short post-event survey. It'll only take a couple minutes. And Stephanie's going to be sharing the link for that survey throughout the panel today. And so, yeah, if we can get started, and maybe we'll get started by getting to know a little bit about each of our panelists. Go ahead, Obi.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here on a Saturday morning. My name is Obioha Okereke. I go by Obi. And I am a consultant in the Seattle area. And then I'm also the creator of College Money Habits, which is a platform that focuses on teaching adults and students about financial literacy.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us out. And my name is Amani Harris, and I am a wealth advisor for the last 20 years at an investment firm. My background, just to give you a quick overview, is I was 10 years in the U.S. Army. I was a former Army officer, and then I have a master's degree after that from a local university, Seattle Pacific University. And I love what Ovi is doing in terms of getting people focused early and learning the power of budgeting and credit and things like that. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Ms. Sherlyn.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sherlyn Mcmurray. I am a principal in a consulting firm. I work to help make sure that we are meeting our clients' needs by working with our team, and I cover the entire implementation of technical projects. I have a bachelor's degree in finance and a master's degree in global business. I like cooking from a personal side. I like cooking for my friends and family, but also going to cooking classes. And if I travel or go on vacation, it's all about finding some good food to eat. I'm so excited to be here and happy to support you, Obi, as well.
Thank you all so much. Just to jump right into the panel discussion, we're going to ask our panelists a few questions to learn some more about best practices with money. And then at the end of the questions that we have prepared, we'll have a 15-minute Q&A session where you folks can ask your own questions directly. So to jump right in, what money mistakes have you made in your personal life that you're still trying to change? Whoever would like to start with that, perhaps Obi.
Yeah, so that's a good question. For myself, money mistake that I continue to make is spending too much on food. And that's been an ongoing battle since as long as I can remember, because my two vices really are spending money on clothing and spending money on food. And I've been able to really curb the spending on clothing, but food is a tough one because similar to Sherlyn, when I do travel, a big priority of mine is to try food, especially restaurants that we don't have in Washington State. And so I actually was just in New York for 2 weeks, and I didn't budget for my food expenses. And so that's an ongoing mistake that I've made, and I've tried to combat it by cooking more, which was helpful over the past year in helping me cut back on my spending outside, but I'm not a pro yet when it comes to managing my expenses around dining out.
Got it. Thank you. Sherlyn?
Yeah, that is also a line on my budget for sure. So I think that one of the really big mistakes that I continue to make is not updating my written budget. And so you'll hear more about this today, that we should have a budget. We should know and direct where our money goes. We can take a look at those areas where we're wasting some money like food and reallocate that to savings. You'll hear that a little bit later, but not consistently updating my budget is a mistake that I continue to make. And what I've tried to do to like help myself with that, because that's a lot of work all the time, is with your direct deposit, send it to where you need it to go instead of having it all go into one place. So send what you need to your savings, send what you need to what you're spending on bills, send what you need to your extended savings. And hopefully you'll hear more about that detail a little bit later when we go into what we can do personally for our finances. But my problem is not consistently updating that budget. And so sometimes I lose track that I spent all that money on food, or I lose track that I spent money on something. So get back on it. That's what I do for myself.
Thank you. Thank you. Keeping that budget updated. Go ahead, Amani.
Yeah, I love those answers, first of all. And I think the most important thing about all of this is, to give ourselves grace when we think about money, and know where we make our adjustments. But for me, one of the things that is a unique situation, I think other people probably could relate to this, is family. Your desire to help family members could become an issue. If you're trying to accumulate money by paying yourself first, like Sherlyn said, you've got money allocated automatically going into a accumulation or saving / investing bucket. If you have a family member or someone you want to help who needs money, now you're taking from that pool of dollars and giving it to them, and that is still increases your spending. So I think that's the biggest thing. One of the things that I've done in that regard is to say no. My son the other day called me, and he had run into a situation where he overspent. He didn't want to pay interest, and he said, "Can I borrow some money so I can pay off my credit cards?" And I paused and I said, "No, you cannot. I'm not bailing you out of this one. You're going to have to work your way out." Now, of course, I probably will help him, but I think that's the biggest challenge is trying to keep the family members from spending your money, while also realizing that if you build up and accumulate down the road, you will be able to help them in a better way. And so that's the thing I told him and reminded him of. I said, we have to make sure you don't repeat this process. That's the main reason I told him no.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we've all experienced those tough love situations to an extent, right? Pushing on to the next question here. If excuse me, Obi, if you'd like to start this one. Throughout your personal experiences, what role has credit played in your financial journey?
Thanks, Safari. So with credit overall, I've had a pretty good relationship with credit throughout my life. I've opened my first credit card when I was 18 years old, and I started off just making really small purchases. So like paying for gas and paying for groceries. And when I say groceries, it was in my younger years, so it was really just like apple juice and chips. So not really anything of overall significance. And then I would just I'd pay off my card. And since I was making these like $5 to $10 purchases, it was really easy. And so I started off with just using my credit card for things that I knew I could pay back, things that I could have used my debit card for. And then over time, I started to make more significant purchases, starting off with financing a car. And that was my first real experience with kind of seeing how a credit score impacts your ability to qualify for a loan, and also the impact it has on an interest rate for said loan. Because my credit score was decent at the time, I actually received a pretty low rate on the car that I was financing. And then when my dad co-signed, his credit score was even higher than mine. And so that interest rate on the loan dropped even more. That said, I've made my fair share of mistakes, with the largest one being that I ended up almost maxing out one of my credit cards because I paid it off the next day, but I thought in my mind, okay, if I use a very large amount of the available credit that I have and I pay it off quickly, that'll boost my credit score. and it actually ended up dropping my credit score by over 30 points. And to this day is still kind of the single worst mistake that I've made. But over time, really just working towards paying off my card almost as soon as I use it, and being very proactive about that has really helped me. And this year, I think it's 7 years after I opened up my card, I finally hit an 800 credit score, which was a pretty significant achievement for me. And I've been looking at, thank you, I've been looking at purchasing my first home as well. And as I interact with mortgage lenders and different folks, I've come to realize just how important it is to have a good or an excellent credit score, because over the life of that mortgage loan, I won't be paying as much if I were to have a lower credit score.
Thank you very much. Amani, speak to the role that credit has played in your financial journey.
Absolutely. I love this perspective because Obi is relatively younger, a much younger age than I am. I'm actually 52 years old when it comes to credit. And so I'll tell two parts of the story, but when I was younger, I was 18 years old. I just joined the Army, no credit whatsoever, which sometimes no credit is just as bad as having bad credit. And so there I was, 18 years old, making about $10,000 a year and trying to figure out how to improve my earning potential because I had a family and we did not have a car. So I went to the car dealership and I said, I'd like to check out the car. The guy said, oh yeah, take it home, go show your wife, everything. So that was a problem right there because he was luring me in and I knew nothing about interest. I was so young. So I took the car home. Of course, my wife and I, we loved it. And came back the next day and said, what do I have to do? He said, oh, no problem. We're going to, look at your military background. And then he gave me the car with something like a 15 or 16% interest rate. And in case you don't know the impact of that, that means that if another person came and got that same car for an interest rate of 3 or 4, my payment is going to be almost double, maybe even triple what they're paying. You get a much larger payment for the same thing if the interest rate's higher. So I picked up on this later in life and started to realize how important it is to have a good credit and establish credit. And I understood that relationship, and it's very important to never be late, ever. You cannot be late on anything. It will show up and stay for 7 years on your credit report and then drag your score down. So I use one of the credit monitoring companies, and I lock my credit when I'm not using it so no one else can use it. And then what I do is monitor it to make sure I know where it is, and it's above 800, but back then it was not. And that played a huge role in buying cars and homes. You usually will need to have a good credit score to make a major purchase like a home and a car. So I think my biggest lesson and experience with credit is understanding how impactful it is for your major purchases, as well as employers. Actually, some of them will look at it, and maybe even auto agencies for auto insurance. So it is something you should know what's happening. And the number one thing is don't be late. And then of course the overspending is something that you cannot do with the card, because that causes a higher payment.
Got it. Thank you. I just learned so much there myself, and looking good for 52.
I appreciate that.
All right. So,
Hi, Tafari. I'd like to add just a little as well to that. Like you, Obi, when I bought my first car, I actually didn't really know what my credit score was. So I think just to add to the conversations here, knowing what your credit score is, starting out by getting that report to see what is on your report. The first step is see what's going on. There may be some things on there that shouldn't be on there. When I first bought my car, I saw that my mom's credit stuff was on my car, and she didn't have on my credit, and she didn't have good credit. And so I came out initially with just bad credit. And so I worked with a team to get things cleaned off my credit. And over time, in the beginning, it went up, but paying attention to what it is like, current state, whatever your report is, get it, look at it, figure out what is going on, and see if there's anything that's wrong, see if there's anything that can be changed. And then Amani, you mentioned about getting together with a credit agency and getting that online program through the credit agency. They give you so much information and education about how they are calculating that score. So that's also helpful. Thanks, Tafari.
Of course, thank you. Moving on to question 3, Sherlyn, if you'd just like to stay on here. What's the most important lesson that you've personally learned when it comes to personal finance?
I would say to live within your means, spend within your means. Don't try to get the best car because everybody else has the best car, extra, nice clothes because everybody's got the nice clothes. Live within your own means. They're not paying for your retirement. They're not saving for your retirement. So instead of keeping up by financing that life and using credit cards to get things, save for what you want to do, save for the vacation, save for the larger purchase, and instead of putting it on a credit card, because then you're not spending within your means, and it could take you 10 years to pay off that credit card. And as Amani mentioned earlier, with the interest rates, you're paying that 3 times by the time that you're done. So I think the biggest thing there is just spend within your means. When you have a budget and you can look at what your income is versus your expenses, you can really get an idea of what in your means means.
Thank you. Obi?
Yep. So question was greatest financial lesson that we've learned?
Most important, yes, sir. Most important life lesson that you've learned in your personal finance journey.
Yeah. So for me, it would be, I guess, partly 2 things. To set goals and stop comparing yourself to other people. So for me, the high school that I went to school with a lot of folks who came from wealthy families, and so I was pretty insecure individual, and so at that time I was constantly comparing like what I had to what they had, what cars they drove to what car I drove, what clothes they had versus what clothes I had, and this grew worse in college because now the cars were much nicer, the clothing was much nicer. And all these things. And so it was really easy for me to get down on myself and say like, oh, like I don't have enough. And so it started this kind of like unhealthy relationship with money where I always wanted more. And I was like, oh, I want this car and I want this clothing. And I started to make decisions that I felt would impress other people. So buying clothing that I definitely did not need, that was expensive, where I was like, oh, I'll look better in this. The car that I mentioned previously that I bought was a Mercedes, and part of that was like, oh, I feel like I'll be a cool looking dude if I have this car. And to this day, single worst financial decision I've ever made. But how I like started to kind of come into myself and like get my mind right was I realized that everybody has a different path. Everybody comes from different backgrounds. So none of you in the audience right now, like we didn't grow up the same. Amani and I, we have different experiences. Sherlyn and I, we have different experiences. So it's not fair to compare myself to anybody. But more important that I just set my own goals and track my success based on my own metrics. So I started to set my own financial goals and work towards those. And now, today, like present day, thanks to those goals and really just honing in on what I wanted to accomplish, I'm able to live a life that I didn't really imagine when I was in high school and when I was in college, when it comes to financial freedom. And I also am just more confident making decisions since I'm making them through kind of my own lens and not thinking about like what other people might think about it, or, oh, I could be doing more, or I should be traveling the world, or all these different things. So for all of you, I would highly recommend setting your own goals and tracking your success towards those, and kind of blocking out all the noise, especially with social media being as large as it is today. It's very easy to compare yourself to what other people got going on.
Thank you. That was a deep answer there. What kind of Benz was it?
It was a C300 sedan. I still have it, actually. It was a good social decision, a poor financial decision.
Got it. Understood. Amani, would you like to speak to a life lesson that you've learned in your personal finance journey?
Yes, yeah. And so what I love about what Obi has mentioned here is the starting that relationship, right? He is worlds ahead of many people, and is teaching a lot of younger people as well as older people how to be mature in their relationship with their finances. And so avoiding it is still a relationship. And so what he is saying is he's encouraging you to understand and learn about it, and develop that relationship. And I think it's really important. And the lesson that he mentioned about not comparing yourself to others is really, really important. I'll share a story about that, and I'll tie it into the impact of what I think is the most important lesson around personal finances. When you compare yourself to others, you lose perspective, and you don't understand what decisions you're making. And so the most important thing I think about finances is the power of compounding interest. And what that means is, as you begin to put money into savings and interest earning things, the compounding of interest means that the money you've put in, if it earns 3 or 4%, that additional 3 or 4% next time around will earn more money with that principal. So their interest is earning interest. Some people say your money is making other friends, which is other money. And so that is really powerful. And I like to connect that to the concept of paying yourself first. Before you can go and spend on this or that or the other, you have to pay your future self first. And so the story I wanted to tell you guys about that, and it's very much connected to what Obi talked about, and it's something I saw in my experience throughout my years of working in this field, is that I had one person who was delivers mail. And she always developed the principle of pay yourself first from the very moment she got her first job. She was aggressive in that because she thought, I want to be good when I'm older, not just today. So she put 30% of everything away into different things like savings and her retirement vehicles at work, etc. But that paying herself 30%, and she began to learn how to live off the other 70 and budgeted that as well. So as a result of it, you fast forward, she's a millionaire and never really made more than $40,000 a year, which is still a decent amount of income. On the flip side of that, another individual that I've ran into to try to help was making $300,000 a year, a dentist, living paycheck to paycheck, and has not even $100,000 accumulated for retirement. And in order to maintain the amount of spending that he was trying to spend yearly, he should be, you just could take the annual spend divided by 5%, or what I call 20 times the rule of financial freedom is 20 times the amount you want to spend annually. So if he was spending 300,000, it's unrealistic that he would need something like 6 million to sustain that. And he's nowhere near that. And so he has a massive problem. And I asked him, I said, well, what's going on here? You have to stop spending like this. You should only be spending 50,000 or 75,000, and the rest you need to put away to catch up. And he said to me, well, I can't really do that because I live over here in this nice, I don't want to say where because I might be biased, but I live in this nice neighborhood. I'm have this big house. I'm leasing 2 cars. I want to do these trips with my friends and so forth. And he basically told me that he had to do what his friends were doing. And I told him a very direct thing. I said, well, later on, when you stop working, you won't be able to hang out with your friends because you won't have the resources that they have. And I think that was a tough thing to mention, but I was trying to let him know you have to catch up. And so we had 2 different people, one that's comparing himself to others, like Obi mentioned, and the other one who did not do that and had their own relationship and decided, pay yourself first and let time work to your advantage. And you'll be really pleased later on. And it's never too late to make that decision to begin that process.
Thank you. Pay yourself first, pay yourself early. I like that a lot. I see there's some people kind of trickling in. So a quick hello for y'all, and a reminder, if you'd like to be eligible for the $50 gift card, please stay for the remainder of the event and then fill out the short survey that is being sent out in the chat throughout. And if we could finish that today, that would be great as well. So pushing on to the next question, talking about paying yourself first. How and when should you start planning for retirement? You could continue on with that, Amani.
Now, right away, like Obi mentioned, he's given out some great information, and on the website there's a lot of information there. The first step is to not look back and say, well, I'm not this, I'm not that. You know, you have to know who you are, where you are, and then begin to make adjustments to get to the next stage. So the most important thing is to start immediately. Understand what your spending looks like, understand what type of resources you have to be able to pay yourself first. So it starts with the budget. Also, it's important to look at how to look for ways to increase your income. Being 52, like I told you before, when I was in the military, I joined right out of college, and I was making like $13,000 a year. I knew I didn't want to stay there, so I had to find ways to improve my skill set and qualifications to try to earn more income. And it wasn't a bad process, because I think throughout life, lifelong learning is kind of like a thing. I think it's a part of the human experience. So I found ways to increase my income. And I think for many people, that's an important thing. You will have jobs. I sent a message to my children, and I had like 21 jobs throughout my life, from every fast food place you can think of, starting in high school. It wasn't until later where I really realized, oh, this is what I love to do. And you know, I actually earned more money doing that. And so staying patient, but with what you're doing and understanding where you are and making the necessary adjustments to increase your income in an intelligent way and decrease your expenses. And that creates monthly a certain amount of extra cash flow. So you have to do a real budget to know what is the cash flow, or what is the discretionary money I have, and immediately know, okay, 30% goes to myself, my future, my family, and my legacy. So there's so many things I could say about this. I'm going to stop right there because I want to allow the other people to chime in and share information.
Thank you. Thank you. Very well said, speaking to the legacy. Obi, how and when would you start planning for retirement?
So, yeah, I completely agree with everything Amani said. With starting now is the best time. And a lot of the discussions I've had with other, like my friends and then also family. And so for context, I'm 25 years old. One thing that I have a twin brother. He and we have very different relationships with money, because I'm always like looking forward and thinking like 20 years ahead. And then he's much more of a like live in the moment type of person. And I think a healthy balance of both is great, and not to focus on one or the like too much on one or the other. But one thing that I've always told him is like, yeah, it's cool to have fun now, but you also want to make sure that you're putting like the work in to make sure that you can have fun in the future, which speaks to kind of the story that Amani told earlier. And I think the best way to start thinking about retirement is think about your lifestyle right now, and think about the lifestyle that you want to live in retirement. So like, do you want to be traveling frequently? Do you want to be going to new restaurants every week? Do you plan on taking care of your children, your grandkids? Do you like cars? Do you want to drive fast cars? Just thinking about all the things that you want to do in retirement and thinking about how much that might cost is a great way to get started. Because, I mean, let's say that currently you live off of, like, you spend $30,000 a year. And in retirement, you expect to live the exact same way. And you want to retire at, let's say, for example, that you want to retire at 60. And life expectancy takes you around 80 or so. That means you're going to spend 20 years in retirement. So you would want $30,000 for those 20 years. And I believe that comes out to 600,000. Amani, you can check my math. But that means that you, I mean, give or take like taxes and inflation and things like that, you would want at least that amount of money to sustain your lifestyle. And so the grander the lifestyle that you want to live in retirement, the more money naturally that you would want to set aside. The more conservative your lifestyle, then you may not need $1 million to retire comfortably. And some actionable ways to get started. So I don't know how many of you have savings accounts right now, and I don't know how many of you have high yield savings accounts. But I would say if you don't have a high yield savings account, I would Google what it is and open one up. And for like briefly, a high yield savings account is going to offer you more interest than a regular savings account. And a regular savings account, to be blunt, is virtually useless with the amount of money that you accrue in them, as opposed when compared with a high yield savings account. And so it's not useless in and of itself, but a high yield savings account is going to allow you to accrue much more in interest. So you're going to earn more money over time. And both Amani and Sherlyn talked about paying yourself first. One thing that I've done that's helped me over the past 2 years is I opened up a high yield savings account, and then I've automated my income such that every month a certain amount of my income goes directly into my savings account. So every month without fail, I'm saving money, and I budget around my saving instead of making like saving a secondary part of my budget, if that makes any sense. So my lifestyle revolves around that saving. So like when I take vacations, I know that, okay, like I got to monitor my spending somewhat because that amount of money is coming out of my account regardless. And so I need to have the money there. And that's helped me save a significant amount over the past 2 years. But I would start by, before I pass it along, start by thinking about the lifestyle that you want to lead in retirement and what that might look like from a financial perspective. Set a goal, create a budget, as Amani mentioned. So thinking about how much money do you earn right now, and what are all of your expenses around like rent or mortgage and food and things like that. And after you've paid all of that,
they are very educated. They know they learn anything like this.
After you've paid for all of your necessary expenses, what's left over? And that's your discretionary income. And there's I believe an article on that on the Bird Bar Place website. But with that discretionary income, then determining what do you want to do with it? Do you want to invest? Do you want to save? Do you want to pay off debt? And then just making sure to always be setting aside money towards saving. But those are some of the things that I'd recommend getting started on today. That'll help give you more perspective as to what the future could look like and help you set some actionable goals.
Thank you. Yeah, I liked when you said like savings as like a non-negotiable. Everything revolves around the savings. That's coming out irregardless of what. I really enjoy that.
Yeah. And Tafari, I'd like to also add to this discussion around retirement. Use your 401k too, if you have it. I didn't hear that, so I'm not adding, additional, use your 401k if you have that offered to you at your workplace. And if you don't have that offered to you at your workplace, make sure that you're getting an IRA account, but start saving now for retirement, as Obi and Amani suggested, even if it's just a little bit, because that will make a difference later. And you can make adjustments if you have an increase in income, and you can make adjustments when you get bonuses or your lifestyle changes, because it's a long period of time for, in some cases, to think about it. So you're always going to be making adjustments throughout, but paying attention to it and getting started now is what I wanted to offer.
Yeah, and that's such an important statement that she mentioned, because the whole idea of paying yourself first, and if you were going to do that, part of that paying yourself first dollars is going into your savings, and part of it is going into maybe a medium-term investment account where you can earn more money, and then your retirement account is a long-term investment account. And a lot of times your employers will put money in there to match your contributions. And in some cases, you might even get some type of credit, a tax credit. So the first step is to get in and start learning about this topic and knowing how to take advantage of a higher interest earning savings account, like Obi mentioned, how to have a medium-term investment account where you can earn more money on your money, and how to have your long-term retirement account. I was just playing around here a second, and I Googled personal finance, and I got it's like over two I want to say, yeah, that's 2 trillion hits. And so there's a lot of information out there. And the reason I brought that up is the more you build your relationship and seek out resources like the Bird Bar website, you can then define what it means to you, as opposed to just taking advice from your friends who may or may not know what they're talking about. Because they may tell you something and it might be 60% correct and 40% not for you. So let's have fun today. True. But we also have to have fun tomorrow. And so that's my point with that. And so I think I've checked out the site. Go to the Bird Bar website. It's telling you right away, what is your discretionary income? How do you create a budget? There's some great resources there for you.
Thank you. Thank you for the plug, Amani. Moving on to question 5 here. Sherlyn, what is the importance of playing an active role in your finance?
Oh, so important. All the things we talked about. It's important to make sure that you are directing your money. That the most important part of being active and engaged in your planning of your finances is knowing what you have, knowing what you're spending it on, and then directing it to where you want it to go. But I also want to say we should be paying attention to our partners and our families as well, because they do impact how we spend money. Some of us are savers. You may be with a committed partner who is a spender. One of the things that my husband and I did in the beginning of our relationship is we educated ourselves. We went to it's a faith-based training called Financial Peace University, where you essentially talk about your finances together, talk about your relationship, Amani, to your relationship with money, and determine together the plan and the path. Because if you're trying to meet your goals and working towards your goals, you also have to have a partner in place who is walking that same path with you, or you'll take a step back over time. So our first session, we had to cut up our credit card, and we had to learn to live within our means. And we talked about using cash and putting those in envelopes to direct it, because you have to start with the basics. You put your discretionary money in an envelope, and that's all you get to spend for the month. Like if you're going to go out to dinner, or you're going to go and do something, that's it. When it's done, it's done. So really understanding and paying attention to how much you have to spend where comes with sometimes going back to basics, taking an envelope, putting the cash in, seeing the cash leave your hands and feeling it, that's all part of the relationship with money versus swiping a card, using a credit card, and then you lose track of all of the stuff that you spent. So sometimes just taking that step about really understanding where your money is going is super important.
Thank you. Amani, could you speak to the importance of playing an active role in your personal finance?
Yeah, what she just said was so important. It's so easy to, oh, well, here's my card and here's this and that. And it's not real money, really. It doesn't impact you. But if you're looking in that envelope or that one account and you're like, oh, wait a minute, I don't want to buy that. And so it's making some basic rules. But I want to tell you guys one that is really, really important to think about. You could have a basic rule. For example, you could say, let's say I had a problem buying something like shoes or whatever, and I was always buying shoes because they look good and I want to have nice shoes. Well, the first thing I could do is I could say, you know what? If a purchase is over a certain dollar amount, I must wait a week or two before I actually can buy it. I can look at it and think about it. So I started to implement that strategy. There's so many things I never purchased because I just looked at it and was like, and then the person would come over and say, how can I help you? And I'll say, oh, I'm just looking, thank you. And I would never come back and buy that. They did not love me there because I wasn't buying things. But the other thing that's super important to think about when we talk about interest, there's something called the rule of 72. If you take 72 and you divide it by the rate of interest that is attached to it, that's how long it takes the amount to double. So 72 divided by 1, it's percent interest. It's going to double in 72 years. But 72 divided by, let's say, 36, and Obi, you can check me on this, I think that would double in 2 years. And so when you go out and you use a credit card from a department store, or when you are a young person, when young people go to college, they would just send them credit cards in the mail, and but flip it over and see what is the interest rate you're paying to that entity. And usually it's 19 to 30%. The other thing to think about is when you are buying something anywhere you go, you are giving someone a certain amount of margin, which is expressed in the form of interest. So if I buy something from a department store, didn't say the name on purpose, but everyone knows if you come into a large amount of money, where are you going if you want to treat yourself? I won't say the name, but you will go there. You don't have to use their credit card. But if you did, you're giving them interest there. But then once you buy something, the amount of margin that they're making is usually around 20 to 30% as well. So you're paying people interest either way it goes, and you're paying interest by buying, you're giving that entity interest. And every entity exists to collect some form of margin, otherwise they will go out of business. And so instead of spending money all the time and giving other people forms of interest, later on you can evolve. Once you've got a savings and then medium-term stuff going on, you can evolve into owning parts of things. So I'll end on a quick story. I got in trouble with my ex-wife about this. I hate to use my son in all these examples, but it's classic. He and I are like that. And so one day he just was on my case, and he said, Dad, he's a smart kid, by the way. So he goes, Dad, I want to get that PlayStation. I've got straight A's and blah, blah, blah. And I said, stop text messaging. He said, I have straight A's. I said, well, it's going to get harder. But anyways, he asked for the PlayStation, and I said, no. But I think about it. And so then later on, around the holiday season, I bought him some shares of stock in the company that made that video game. And then I get this phone call from my ex-wife. What are you doing? Why are you buying a child stock when he should get the game that he wanted? And I said, I want to teach him things that are important. And he and I had a dialogue, and we made a bet that in 20 years, he wouldn't know where the game was, but he would know where the stocks were. And so we talked about it 20 years later. And he's like, you know what? You were right. So I think thinking about where you're spending your money is really powerful. That then enhances your relationship, and you start to realize you would rather be an owner of those companies that people are using the products and services, which then gives you interest, which then puts you closer towards accumulating and creating a legacy.
Very well said. Thank you. Obi, the importance of playing that active role.
Yeah, so I have a lot to say on this, but I want to first respond, or kind of like respond to what Amani just mentioned, because a lot of what he was talking about ties back to delayed gratification, where like putting off kind of this immediate satisfaction, understanding that in the future you're going to see a larger reward. So by not purchasing clothing all the time, you're then improving your ability to set money aside to savings or investments and things of that nature. And earlier, when we're talking about the most important lessons that we've learned, I didn't mention delayed gratification, but it is something that's been really kind of prevalent throughout my life, because at the age of 21, I was working at Nordstrom. And I don't know if that was the department store that Amani was alluding to, but while I was working there, I was making maybe $18,000 a year. And then by the age of 23, I was making over $100,000. However, from high school up until really that point where I started earning like more money, I learned how to manage my money and not buy everything that I wanted. So I wasn't going out to eat all the time. I wasn't taking vacations. Like throughout college, I can't recall a single vacation that I took to a different state. And I've always been a fan of jewelry and watches and nice clothing. And I wasn't doing all these things when I didn't have as much. And so it became a lot easier when I started earning more money, because it happened very quickly. I wasn't then pressed to, I was like, oh, I need to travel a bunch right now, or I need to buy these things, or I need to do these things. And in prioritizing saving and investing, I put myself at a place where I'm still fairly young in my eyes. I can do all the things for the most part that I want to do without having to worry about the financial impact. So when I mentioned before, like taking vacations and not looking at how much I'm spending, I'm grateful that I can do that and come back and be like, oh, wow, like that's crazy how much I spent, but it doesn't ruin my life, if that makes sense. And that's because I took several years of not doing all these things. So now when I do want to buy clothing, I'll just buy the clothing. When I want to take a vacation, I'll take that vacation. And that is similar to, I think, what we've all been talking about when you think about retirement. It's understanding that, like right now, present day, the decisions that you make are going to have an impact on how you live your life several years from now or 20 years from now. And so it's really important to, with every financial decision, be thinking about how does that impact me, or how does this impact me long term? And with playing an active role in your finances, the major thing is that it's going to give you more confidence when making decisions. Because if you get involved with your finances and you know, all right, I'm earning this much, I'm spending this much, this is what I've got left over, these are areas where I can cut back, then you just have just right then and there, you have a better perspective of what's going on. However, if you don't take that step, then you may not know how much money you're earning. You don't know how much you're spending. And then it's hard to like know how much can I save? How much can I use to pay off debt, and to set these realistic goals. And I'll close with, I've been working with a young lady for the past month who reached out, who needed help around creating a plan towards paying off debt and budgeting, because she wasn't sure where her money was going. She's like, I know I'm doing okay, but I don't know where my money is going right now. And I want to work systematically at paying off my debt. And I also want to create a budget. And so from the moment that we started working together to now, to see how much her confidence has grown around what's possible for her has been just amazing. From not knowing like where things are at, or if her goals are possible, to knowing like, okay, like all my debt's going to be gone by April of 2023. I'm going to have an emergency savings fund. I'll be able to start investing and all these things, where things that may have not seemed realistic are now realistic, and you know exactly like when they will occur. So as soon as you can get involved, which hopefully is today, I would say get, and that's not to say that many of you are probably not already extremely involved with your finances, but the real advantage is that it's going to give you more confidence when making financial decisions. So when you go out to lunch, you'll know, like, I can afford this. This is within the budget that I've laid out. You take vacations, you'll know, like, I'm okay. I can do this. Like, this is not, you won't be, it removes a lot of stress and improves a level of autonomy and mobility that you have to just kind of move freely.
Thank you. Thank you. So many nuggets of wisdom. We appreciate all of this so much. Going to move into our Q&A session now. And so folks, feel free to just go ahead and type a question into the chat here, or throw a hand up if, in the reactions, and or just unmute and go ahead and blurt it out. I have one personally that I'd like to ask. Obi, you had just said that the person that you were helping out, they now have plans for a emergency savings account. So I was just curious, is that something that is separate than the regular savings account? So would you say that you have a checking, an emergency savings, and then a retirement savings account?
Well, so emergency savings is a part of your savings. Holistically, it's what it speaks to is it's just 3 to 6 months of your living expenses. So when you think about in a given month, how much money you spend around things that enable you to survive, which would include like mortgage or rent, bills, groceries, things like that. It wouldn't include shopping or dining out to like Chick-fil-A or any of those things. Those would be considered wants. So with that emergency fund, it's going to be 3 to 6 months of living expenses. And you would, like a high yield savings account is a great place to build that. But the purpose of an emergency savings fund is in the event that, let's say, you suddenly lose your job, or there's a surprise medical emergency, or you need to fix something on your home, you've got money that's already set aside for those sudden, unexpected things that you can then pull from without blowing up your budget or digging into retirement savings or having to sell off investments or taking out a loan.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I just wanted to add something to that he just said. Let's say you spend your entire life with an emergency savings account, but it only earns 0.5% interest, if that much. What he's saying is it's much better for you to try to have a savings account that's for emergencies that earns a little bit higher interest. So I am using this calculator online, and at 0.5% interest over the lifetime of just sitting in, I put in $10,000, that's an emergency fund. That may or may not be the right number. Like he mentions, 3 to 6 months of expenses. The person would have, in 25 years, $11,000 it would grow to. But if that same person actually made 2% on that savings, it would be $16,000. So you're always trying to figure out how do you have a little bit more interest while also, number one thing, thinking about the degree of risk. So your savings should not have a lot of risk associated with it. But then when you start thinking about your retirement account, which is longer term, you will have things like stocks in it, and you will have more interest earning possibility, but also you are assuming more risk when you have the ability to earn more interest. And so one major thing is to start to understand how it all works so that you're understanding the risk reward relationship. What kind of interest are you earning? What's the risk associated with it? And there's levels from no risk all the way up to excessive risk. You want to know what you're doing. And it's okay to admit that you don't know, because the best question is when you start off and you go, I'm here, I need to educate myself, and you seek out resources. So there's lots of ways for you to understand these things, and getting involved in your retirement plan at work there's tons of resources there. That's a very good place to start. So I'll stop right there and kind of transition over to where we're going from here.
Thank you. Thank you. It looks like what you were kind of touching on is one of our first questions in the chat here. And so someone had asked, high yield savings account, how much interest does it give? So I'm assuming they're asking just roughly what number are we looking for when we're going for a high yield savings account, or what range could we try to shoot for? Obi?
Okay, yeah, so and I typed out like a very quick message in the chat, but a lot of HISAs right now are offering in the ballpark of 2% on an annual basis. And this is compared with, I think, regular savings accounts, it's 0.07 on average, or like 0.13. It's a lot less. I think it's basically on average right now, high yield savings accounts are offering up about like 20 times as much in interest because interest rates are rising. And so I've seen my interest rate on my high yield savings account go from 0.6 to now it's like slightly above 2%. And so yeah, that's it's very significant. I would recommend NerdWallet as a resource for those of you who are looking for more information, where I would just Google high yield savings accounts NerdWallet, because monthly they will release, they publish a report on high yield savings accounts that they recommend, and they'll show you the minimum balance required. Usually it's 0, and then the interest rate for that account. And I'll also just add that some accounts are going to offer more than 2%, because I saw one the other day that was offering 4%. But make sure to do your research on pros and cons, and to not be lured in by the rates, because there are some accounts out there that are not that great when it comes to customer service and and some places I've seen people have had their accounts just closed with no explanation and they didn't get their money back. So not to scare you, but to encourage you all to make sure to do your research. The bank that I use is called Ally Bank, also for my high yield savings.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely do the due diligence. Definitely hearing that. Got another question in the chat here. And so the question itself is, how do you save if what you earn isn't enough to get your family by? But I'm guessing, so I'm kind of rephrasing that to, how do we save when we don't have that much excess income? Like how do you just, how do you get started when you're not making as much as you would like to be?
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts on that one, and Amani and Obi, please add. When I was in my 20s, I got a second job. I was working for a bank at the time, and I got a second job because I wasn't making enough money to start saving for the things that I wanted to do, saving for a car, saving for a vacation, paying down student loans. I wasn't making enough money for what I wanted to do. So I got a second job. But I also wanted to add that if you do that budget, if you sit down and look at where all of your money is going, you may find that there are ways that you can cut back in 1 or 2 areas that you weren't paying attention to, that you could use that then to start funding that initial emergency savings account, which could just be about $1,000 to catch anything that happens, something that breaks down, or some emergency that you get into where you need, they say that what's $1,000, and then the 3 to 6 months worth of your expenses you can start saving towards that. But I would say, like, look at your current state, where you are now, what you are spending everything on, and make decisions about that. Do you need to spend money in this area or that area to try to get to starting that savings?
Thank you very much. Looking at these other questions here, or would anybody else like to speak to that? Sorry, while I kind of go through these questions.
Yeah, I would throw in a little bit on that. I think Sherlyn's exactly right. And to Obi's point, don't compare yourself to other people, because when you see other people, you may not you may not realize that they put in a lot of work, and it took them a lot of time to get to where they are. When I had a similar situation living in going to high school with kids who had a lot of money and came from wealthy families, and I did not have that. And so since the age of 13, I was buying my own clothing and working all these jobs to earn money for some fancy pair of pants. Back then it was called the Gerbeau jeans. You guys probably have no idea what that is. But it was some, the thing that you had to have if you were a cool kid. And that was a huge mistake. And what I decided to do was realize, how to increase my earnings. And so at that time I was making $3.35 an hour. Then I joined the Army out of high school with no education. And I was making $6 an hour, $13,000 a year. And I told some other people, I said, I think I'm going to try to take some college classes somehow. And they said, why are you doing that? That's stupid. And I went, what? Like, I thought, those are no longer my friends. Those are my associates. And then I had friends that supported my efforts to improve myself. And so it doesn't matter who you are. There's all kinds of story about people who started late in life. I don't know, the guy who started KFC didn't start till he was like in his 50s or something. So there's people who start things later and become amazingly successful. The woman who wrote Harry Potter, I can't think of her name. She was almost homeless and way later in her life when she wrote it. You can do anything you want to increase your income, but you don't want to be like that person I mentioned earlier who spends all of it. You want to increase your income and allocate. That's how you're going to create more. And also doing the budgeting, like Sherlyn said. And if you're hesitant or you're about to spend, you just go, what would Sherlyn do? And it would be, she would budget. She would show you what you would follow, or what would Obi do in this situation? Delayed gratification, like he said.
Thank you. We are at time here, but if we're all cool with it, Eduardo, would you like to ask a question? Just go ahead and come off mute.
Okay, quick question, everyone. Hello, everyone.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to ask, I'm torn in between going to trade school and taking a student loan to study a professional course in university. I just need your advice on that real quick.
Yeah, so my immediate thoughts, and I'll try to give you things to consider as opposed to direct advice, because I don't know your full situation. When considering taking on a loan, it's always important to think about your ability to pay off that loan and what you hope to achieve. So looking at like education and taking out a loan, like what is the end goal? So what profession are you aiming to enter after completing that degree or those courses? And what does compensation look like for that job or career role? And will it be one that enables you to actually pay off that loan and also be happy? Because also your general happiness is important. But thinking like really just critically about, okay, am I taking out, because if you're going to take out a lot of money for a job or career that may not offer compensation that would allow you to pay off that loan, it is something worth thinking about on if that will be a great long-term decision, because the last thing that you want is to be I suppose stuck in an environment that isn't allowing you to live the life that you want to live, in terms of comfortability with saving and being able to afford to pay bills. That's some of my initial thoughts on that.
Thank you. And just to correct myself, we got a couple more minutes. I apologize about that. It's until 11:15, excuse me. I got another question here in the chat from Jack Rockwell.
Real quick, Tafari,
Yes.
I just wanted to see if Amani or Sherlyn had anything to say with respect to Eduardo's question, and then also see if we've answered, I suppose, Eduardo's question.
Your response was perfect. Doing research, comparing and contrasting how much money you're going to make versus how much is going to go out, because it's a loan. And so whenever you're thinking about a loan, the same type of research that you would do for any other kind of loan, you kind of just need to know, what are you going to get from it? And is that going to be valuable to you?
Yeah, and I would throw in, when I was taking those college classes at Eduardo, they even had to get on, they kind of got on my case a little bit, because they said, oh, you need to take this humanities classes at this music class. And I went, well, how is that going to help me get a job? And so I was always, from the moment I went into it, thinking, what is the outcome? What jobs will I get? How will this qualify me to get that job? And does it pay what I am expecting? You have to think about that in your decision-making process. Otherwise, if it's just for enhancing your knowledge, that's what the libraries are for. You can go to a library for free and read. You don't have to pay someone to do that. So it's the outcome that you're looking for. And it sounds like, Eduardo, you're looking to increase your earnings. So you want to make sure what you're doing is going to increase your earnings. And is that the right way to go about financing it? So, like Obi said, we don't know your situation, but you have to make you put these things in consideration.
Eduardo, feel got a good response there? So I'm gonna hope that's yes. Another question in the chat is isn't it better to invest in some sector? I'm assuming better than saving in a savings account. Wouldn't it be better to invest? Is a question that we have in the chat here. Amani, can you speak to that at all?
Yeah. So the possibility of earnings comes along with the risk. And in case you haven't watched the news, the stock market is under a lot of pressure this year. To answer your question, the growth part of our economy, large growth companies, the majority of them are down 20% year to date. Yet some of those investments could be really good long term. So when you're looking to invest, you're looking to manage the risk associated with investing. And once you have established a proper timeline, that then allows you to come up with a decision on what degree of risk you're going to take. Short-term account probably is not a smart idea to put any risk in that, because you need that as a just-in-case emergency. If you've put your emergency fund in and you've lost half of it, now you don't have the money for emergency. So you can't really take as much risk there. That's why the savings, the high interest earning savings account is appropriate for your short-term money. But then when you start getting out into your long-term money, you also have to think about the amount of risk you're taking there. And if you're going to say, hey, it's long-term and I have the emotional ability to maintain perspective when there's problems, that the amount of risk I'm taking will work itself out over time, then you could take more risk. But if you don't do that, even if it's long-term, some people will say, well, I'm going to put it all in this one thing. And then it goes down in there, you get emotional and they sell, and they're selling low, which is the opposite of what you should be doing. So you're trying to understand how to manage risk. Typically going into one sector for long-term money is not following the principles of investing. You're breaking the concept of allocation first, which is how much do you have in risk versus stable. And then diversification is how much you have spread across the risk component. So if you're all in one sector, you are not diversified, which exposes you to more risk. And if you've picked the wrong sector, now you have a real problem. And so yes, you can make more, but there are a lot of things to consider. I don't want to get too far into this one, but I'll mention crypto a little bit. You know, it was a high flyer for a while, and now it's not as much of a high flyer, and it might come back. What if you said, oh, I'm going to put all of my emergency money in that? It would have felt good for a while, and then it wouldn't feel so good. So that's breaking the principles. If you had everything in that one thing, you got to diversify. And typically the principle is you shouldn't have more than 5% in one area or one specific company. So maybe sector's a little larger, and even that sector, 10, 15% spread across a bunch of different companies. So it does become a little bit more involved. There are easy ways to achieve getting your diversification. Obi mentioned some of that in there through, owning the market. So I'm going to stop there and allow Sherlyn and Obi to kind of say a few words about this as well.
Thank you. Yeah, please. Obi.
Yeah, so I'm going to echo everything that Amani mentioned, but with investing, because I've made a lot of investing mistakes throughout my journey, and I would say really all that I have to add there is that one of the best ways to approach investing in the most fruitful way is from a long-term perspective. So looking not just months ahead, but years or decades ahead, and really thinking critically when it comes to making an investment decision. Let's say you were looking at a particular company, thinking about, is this a company that's going to be around 10 years from now? Is a great way to start. And if you really just have no idea of where to start with investing, you can just start by investing in a company that that you utilize. So if you have an Amazon Prime account and you like what Amazon does from a business perspective, then you might consider purchasing some shares or partial shares of Amazon, similar to Microsoft or Apple. Let's say you have an iPhone. Or if you like McDonald's and you want to invest in restaurants, there's different ways to invest in things that you most likely understand. But alternatively, a great way to go about investing for the long term, as Amani mentioned, is through funds that are going to focus on the broader stock market. And a resource that I recommend for all of you would be Investopedia, which is a resource that I used when I started to invest. And it really breaks down all the terms, what is the stock? What is a mutual fund? What does it mean to invest? And things like that, because investing can seem very difficult and hard to understand at first, but there are ways to approach it where you can be pretty hands-off and still take advantage of growing your money over time. But I would start by Googling every question you have. That's how I've learned, I think, just about everything that I've learned as it relates to personal finance, outside of asking professionals. Just Googling, what does it mean to invest, or where can I invest? But making sure that you're going to multiple spots before ultimately making a decision.
I love that. Yes, education and understanding what you're doing with the money. I wanted to kind of co-sign what you said, Amani, about emotions around the money. So first get your emergency savings in place, then think about the investing that you're talking about, because then you can be less emotional about the changes that are happening in the market and the things that are happening in the market when you're set. When you've got your savings in place, you have your 3 to 6 months, ready to go, instead of jumping in and just investing in something that's new for the day.
Yeah, and there are a lot of websites that will keep in mind, you have to support your decision to own companies with data. And so keep in mind what's the main reason you're buying a company stock? You want that stock price to go up. That's called capital appreciation. And the reason it goes up is that company is consistently growing its profits. And so there's ways to see that information. you can, because they're publicly traded, you can see that information on a variety of websites where you can see how fast are they growing earnings versus other companies, and what's their debt look like, and things. So there's details behind why you would own certain companies. And if you, like Obi said, if you know it and you use their products and services, now go and investigate, do they have this data to support how you feel about it? And there's websites for that. Investopedia is a good one. There's another one called Financial Visual where there's a screener. There's all kinds of places that are out there. The reason that certain things exist is to help you be diversified, so you're not having to pick one individual company. But you got to make sure you get that allocation between the amount of risk you're taking versus not taking correct in all of your accounts, long-term, medium. I'll give you a simple example. If I said, let's go, we're going to ride to the airport, and you said, Amani, I want to get there in 15 minutes. And I threw a helmet at you and said, put this on, there's no seatbelts, we're going to go 270 miles an hour. You might not get in the car. But some people might say, well, I'm okay with that because I'm fine with that level of risk. That's what you want to know. How fast is your car going, and are you okay with that? Because it's not okay just to say, well, I want to be there in 15 minutes. You want to know what you're getting into and be smart about it. So educating yourself, like Obi mentioned, and thinking about the risk management associated with investing is really important. That helps you establish a perspective so you don't get emotional.
Thank you. We are now at time here just to get this last question / closing remarks, if that's all right. What if your monthly income doesn't take you home enough to save? What do we do? We kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but if we can circle back to it, Obi?
Yep. So when it comes to saving, it's really important to calculate first your discretionary income. So again, that's the amount of money that you have left over after paying for taxes and all of your necessary expenses. So after you get your paycheck, and then you total up the cost of all your needs, all your bills, whatever is left over is then your discretionary income. If you find that there is nothing left over, then you will then begin to want to think about how can you cut back on expenses, or how can you increase your income. And that's why it's important to first calculate discretionary income, because it lets you know right away, like, okay, I've got this much left over, or, oh, I have nothing left over, or I need more in order to cover my expenses, and then begin to look at what resources are available. If you find that you can save maybe $50 a month, then work towards saving $50 a month. Or a smaller amount that that you can contribute towards a savings account and still be able to do some of the things that you enjoy, or go out at least once to do something that you enjoy. But again, if you find that there's nothing left over, then you'll want to begin to think about, how can I increase my income, whether it's through your primary means of income, or through another avenue, whether it be picking up another job, or if you already have like a side hustle that you can turn into, that can improve the amount of profit that you're bringing in, or are there some areas where I can cut back on my expenses? And those are really like the two primary options that you'll have if you find yourself in that situation.
That's great. Sherlyn, Obi, Amani, thank you all so much for coming on and sharing your expertise with us. Everybody, we have more personal finance resources at the Bird Bar Place website. We've got videos and blogs and articles and quizzes and a bunch of stuff on budgeting and savings and investing and credit. Please be sure to do that survey today. It's in the chat. And yeah, thank you all so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. And thank you, Sherlyn,
Thank you.
Amani, Stephanie, Tafari, for being here and for all your help with everything.
Anytime.